We had a whole plan that sold abortions, and it was called sex education. Break down their natural modesty, separate them from their parents and their values, and become the sex expert in their life so they turn to us when we would give them a low-dose birth control pill they would get pregnant on, or a defective condom, because we didn't buy the most expensive condoms, we bought the cheapest condoms. Our goal was 3 to 5 abortions from every girl between the ages of 13 and 18. We gave them a low-dose birth control pill that in order to provide any level of activity had to be taken at the same time every single day. The girl wouldn't take it accurately, and if you miss that thing, the protection is out of her system. The sexual activity goes from 0 or once a week to 5 to 7 times a week. She doesn't take the pill properly, she gets pregnant, and who does she call when she's pregnant? She calls us. We're the experts. And we were ready. We used a script designed to overcome every single objection. That's what sales is. Overcome the objection and you get the order, in this case, the abortion. And when she calls, the first question is reassure. And so the girl confesses, I think I may be pregnant. And the counselor, who's really a telemarketer, that's all they're trained to do, sell over the telephone, but we call them counselors, says, we can take care of your problem. No one needs to know. And then the first question, what's the first day of your last normal period? And she gives this so-called counselor the date, and she says you're 8 weeks pregnant. She didn't say you might be 8 weeks pregnant. She didn't say you could be. She said you are 8 weeks pregnant. So she has planted the first seed in this long marketing thread, and the sad thing is, in this girl's mind, she is the expert. This is the pregnancy expert, and the next question is this good news or bad news? If it were good news, she would not be calling an abortion clinic. It's bad news. And when she replies bad news, this counselor moves right in, because now she wants to identify the fear, to use it to reaffirm that abortion decision anytime that girl moves away. And if she says, well, maybe I need to think about this, your parents will kill you, you'll have to miss drill team, the abortion's sold. Now, abortions are done through all 9 months of pregnancy, not because of Roe v. Wade, but because of Doe v. Bolte, that said for the health of the mother, an abortion can be completed through all 9 months of pregnancy. But the problem was that health was defined as mental health. And we would say to this scared young woman, you would have problems with this pregnancy should you carry it to term, wouldn't you? She'd say yes, and we'd chart it emotional health.
While these lawyers were calling for the right of choice for women, where's the choice when only one option is offered? That's an essential fallacy in the woman's so-called right to choose. In most cases, it's not a choice at all. A decision is reached without all the facts or based on misinformation. Other options are not presented, and a deadly course of action is forced on a woman.
We have to talk about something that uses lies, coercion.
The number one slogan for abortion is pro-choice. And the ironic thing about that slogan is that when you ask women who had abortions, why did you have that abortion? The number one response is, I felt that I had no choice. A majority, maybe upwards of 80% of abortions in America happen with some form of coercion. In other words, not the woman's choice.
I had this one lady that called me one afternoon, and she said that she wanted to make an appointment for her daughter to come in and have an abortion. I said, does she want to have the abortion? Well, you know, it's not her choice.
So I went to a counselor, a Christian counselor, and she kept saying I needed to have an abortion, and then this was not a good thing for me to do, and it wasn't going to be good for my kids. Then I told my fiance, then I told my mother, then I told my other family members. All of a sudden, everybody's like, you can't do this, you can't do this, you don't want to do this is not good for the kids, this is not good for you, this is not good for our marriage, I don't want to raise this child.
Would have been somebody who would have changed the dynamic of our family. And the relationships that they would have created would have changed everyone that they interacted with. But they're not here.
In abortion, it's not about choice, it's about despair. It's not about people who are getting abortions because of freedom of choice. It's about people getting abortions because they feel they have no freedom and no choice.
Through conversations with him pushing the abortion, and then that kind of frustrated me at some point. I just felt like he didn't care about me, that he was just thinking about, like, let's fix this. That's exactly his words, we need to fix this.
But I was in fear and in crisis, and at that point that I felt like I had no choice.
Women are the victims, and in a lot of these cases, women are coerced and in crisis mode and regret the decision that they've made.
Women feel threatened that if they don't have an abortion, their lives will be punished for it. The stories of the boyfriend saying, I'll give you the $300 and our relationship will continue if you have the abortion. If you choose to keep the baby, there's the door.
I was dating a young man and we got pregnant. And the first words out of his mouth to me were, "You're not having it, are you?" And I remember that sinking feeling in my heart, and I thought, well, no, I guess not. And I felt so much pressure.
Absolutely do not think that my choice was a choice. I think it was, like I said before, I think it felt like an ultimatum.
They're all screaming at me. It felt like they were screaming at me. They were constantly insisting, you've got to kill him, you've got to abort him, you can't do this, you've got to go to the clinic, you've got to hurry up. Every week that you wait is making it worse. Go, 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 go. And I finally couldn't take all of their pressure and how supposedly I'm going to make everybody's life miserable. It was relentless. It was like I couldn't even go through the day without hearing them, whether they were actually speaking to me or I'm just remembering something they said to me a couple of hours ago. I mean, they just bombarded me with it. So I guess I have to bear this burden so that everybody else can.
We had a 12-year-old. She came in chewing her gum and looked so carefree. She had her abortion. She came back 2 weeks later for her checkup. Didn't come out of the room, opened the door, and she was in there. She'd brought in a piece of glass and slitting her wrist. 12 years old.
But we all have that moment where we realize that we are moms and we killed our children. It's pretty sick. It's a sick feeling.
Warnings are rarely offered. Women are seldom told the full story of what they're getting into when they authorize an abortionist to kill the baby inside of them. Even if the known consequences and after effects like breast cancer, barrenness, and other female trauma, even if it only impacts half the women or a quarter of the women, wouldn't it be better to let them know what they might suffer from their choice? Wouldn't it still be wise to let them know every potential risk? The government mandates warnings on every other potential danger. Every pack of cigarettes, every alcoholic beverage, every package of medication carries a warning of potential health risks. Why not a warning on something so life-changing, so life-threatening as an abortion?
There's a lot of evidence of physical and psychological consequences. Then there was a big study out of New Zealand about 2 years ago that showed long-term consequences.
Abortion can have long-term consequences on the woman in terms of affecting her fertility.
Many women become infertile. They suffer from other problems with their female organs and end up having to have complete hysterectomies, never able to conceive or have other children. One of our ladies, the power of the suction machine from the abortion was so severe that it caused her fallopian tubes to collapse and she was never able.
I wasn't in for all of that abortion. Somebody else was in there with him. But I went in toward the end and I'd never seen that much blood. I mean, just blood everywhere. And we put her in the recovery room and she just filled the bed. And we changed the bed a couple of times and her blood pressure was erratic. And the doctor left. I was really worried about her and I tried to call him. And her boyfriend kept wanting to go home and her blood pressure stabilized a little bit, but I just didn't believe she was, it's just like that feeling you have that she's not right. At 10 o'clock, the boyfriend said, look, if there's anything happens, I'll call you immediately. And at 4:30, he called the doctor and he didn't take the history and he said put her in a tub of hot water, and when he did, the last little bit of blood in her body ran out. And he called me about 6 and said she's dead. And he immediately started telling me how he was going to do the cover-up. And somehow it all worked out and the autopsy didn't show anything and no charges were filed and nothing happened. The newspapers didn't call, nobody came. We killed that woman and did abortions the next morning. The families are so hurt by what's happened and shamed that their daughter had this abortion and died from it or whatever. They don't come forward. We had one girl, 22 years old, a model who danced in, jumped up on the table, laughed at the doctor that she didn't wear underwear. She was 22 weeks pregnant. We put her on the table. Now, there's a maneuver called the Hansen's maneuver. Now, the doctor may do it himself or someone may do it, but I did it for the big baby, 2 of our big baby abortionists. I held the babies, and you say the head's here, the feet are here, the buttocks are here, and you gently push the baby down into the instruments. And the first time this doctor went in, he pulled out omentum. That's the lining to the intestines. He literally perforated her uterus and was pulling her bowel out her uterus with the very first time he went in with the instruments. And the second time he went in, he pulled out her bowel and he pushed it back in. Live baby. Woke the woman up, put her in my car because it's terrible advertisement to think about having an ambulance in front of an abortion clinic. You just don't want it. So we put her in my car, and we didn't take her to the hospital nearest us. We didn't take her to the hospital that would take the best care of her. We took her across town to a hospital that would help us cover up what we'd done. And this surgeon has taken this girl who has a perfectly complete baby inside her with her bowel pulled out her vagina upstairs to the operating room. 7 doctors operated on that baby, on that girl. They had to do a colostomy to resection her bowel to empty into this bag. They pulled the baby out. He rolled it into the disposable drapes and put it into the incinerator at the hospital. All 7 of those doctors falsified the records. We killed that baby that way. The doctors falsified the records. We told that girl she had an abdominal pregnancy. They have worked very hard to learn how to get Medicaid funds, and they want to increase their tax funding to $700 million a year. Abortion is a skillfully marketed product sold to a very frightened person in crisis. They buy that product expecting a fix and find it's defective. So we put a clinic out on 30. It paid for itself in the first month. It was a profit center, and we were well on the way to opening more clinics. As a matter of fact, our plan was to open 3 abortion clinics in 1983 so I could be a millionaire in 1984. You know, they came in for 2 or 3 hours and wanted to do 20 abortions or 30 abortions and make their money and go away. They didn't care if the instruments weren't clean, and they didn't care if the instruments weren't cool. They just wanted to get their money and get through the day and go. There was a receipt on the chart. They would collect them, bring them up at the front at the end of the day. We would balance them, pay them in cash, no 1099, no W-2. But I'm certain people killing babies for a living probably reported it to IRS, don't you think? We knew how many people, how many calls they got, and what their percentage of completion was. And their raises were based on the percentage of completed abortions. And they got bonuses. And very quickly, it was no longer about selling abortions to other women. It was about money. I saw the potential to make great money. I answered the phone at home at night so we wouldn't miss an abortion. But she is allowed to watch her pregnancy test turn positive or negative, and they would point to a chart on the wall and say, this is a positive test and this is a negative test. And if it's positive, we trained our people to reach over and grab the bony part of her elbow and squeeze. And you see, she's confused. She's hurting. She's just gotten this news that she's pregnant, and she's upset. So you grab the bony part of her elbow and squeeze to get her attention and say, if you have your money, we can take care of this right now. We knew if she went home and talked about it, her support system might help her and might tell her abortion wasn't the answer, but if she just did it right then, it was taken care of. But a certain percentage of those pregnancy tests are negative. They're not all positive. And remember, it costs the same amount of money to get a non-pregnant one in as it does a pregnant one. So if her test was negative, we had a different sales technique. We said, this test is negative. But you know, this test is not sensitive enough to pick up a very early pregnancy. You could still be pregnant and this test would be negative. And you want to know for sure today, don't you? And she would say yes. And we'd say, okay, we have another test we can do. We will just do this sonogram. And we put her on that table as I could put any man, woman, or child on that table. And I could find a pregnancy. You see, all you have to do is find a blob. And everyone's abdomen has a blob. And this girl doesn't know what a pregnant uterus looks like versus a negative one, so you just find a little blob in the abdomen. You flip it around and say, see there it is, you're pregnant. She's shocked. You grab the bony part of her elbow and say, if you have your money, we can just take care of it today. You know, we were doing 20, 30 abortions an hour if we could, at least 20. We had 21 sets of instruments. That's all we had. So we couldn't possibly bring those instruments out, clean them, sterilize them, bring the temperature up in the sterilizer and then 20 minutes sterilization and then cool them down. Our complication rate at the end of my time, last 18 months, was when about 1 out of every 500 had a major life-changing surgery or died. We had one woman die. But because there are no real statistics, and if you can cover it up, you don't report it, and none of ours were ever reported. So we don't really know. The big hospital in Dallas will tell you, the doctors will tell you that they saw botched abortions or see botched abortions all the time. One of the reasons we were able to regulate the abortion clinics in Texas was because of the bad abortionists that had been reported. I mean, one girl died and they went in to examine the clinic and they were using rusted instruments and had no sterilizer and no hot water. But no one talks about what happens inside the abortion clinic. And everyone fights. It's the most chaotic place you can imagine. The doctors fight, the nurses fight, everybody's taking drugs, everybody's drinking, they're having an affair. I recognized I'd been involved in the death of 35,000 babies. The murder of one woman who bled to death from a second trimester abortion. 19 women who'd had hysterectomies or colostomies. And never had one appeared in the newspapers, no lawsuit. But the thing I couldn't deal with was the fact that I had taken the life of my own child by abortion. You can't deal with death and lies on a daily basis without being greatly affected by it. And nobody worked in that clinic that didn't go to the back and put babies' parts together. And even if you didn't put the parts together, there were times when you walked back there and they were on a towel. Delivering a head is very, very difficult, even at, say, 20 weeks. I mean, I had one abortionist keep a girl on the table for 6 hours trying to crush a head. He couldn't do it.
I felt them taking parts out of my body. You know, I've spent the better part of 20 years trying not to remember that, but I do.
Nobody knows what goes on.